Chapter 1. The rule every child knew: silence had a way of making space feel alive. Commander Cyril had spent 43 standard years among the stars. Yet, he had never feared silence until that morning. The observation deck of the exploration cruiser Eiler overlooked a forgotten corner of the Perseus Drift. No trade routes crossed it. No colonies claimed it. Even the oldest star charts marked the region with a single note: empty. And yet nothing about it felt empty. The stars themselves seemed hesitant to shine. No radiation storms. No gravitational anomalies. No drifting wreckage. Only a darkness so complete that every member of Cyril's crew spoke in whispers without realizing it. His first officer finally broke the quiet. "Commander." Cyril did not answer immediately. The sensor display had frozen, not crashed. Frozen. Every instrument on the bridge was focused on one impossible object hanging motionless beyond the viewport. A ship. No engine emissions, no active reactor, no weapons signatures. It simply waited. The vessel was enormous, not the size of a warship, the size of a city. Its surface carried scars older than most civilizations. Entire sections had been rebuilt with different metals over centuries. Gardens protruded beneath transparent domes. Ancient docking rings circled its spine like forgotten crowns. It looked less like a spacecraft, more like history refusing to die. Lieutenant Verek swallowed. "I've searched every archive." His voice shook. "There isn't a registry that matches it." Cyril nodded slowly. "There shouldn't be." A long silence followed. Then another alarm chimed, soft, respectful, as if afraid to interrupt. "Commander," another officer whispered, "we found a marking." The image appeared above the command table. Most of the paint had faded centuries ago, but enough remained: a blue circle, a white star, 3 lines crossing through both. Cyril stared without breathing. No, the bridge remained silent. Everyone knew the symbol, not because they had seen it, because every history lesson claimed it had been destroyed. Children learned about it the way they learned myths. The mark of old humanity. Erased. Burned from every official record after the Great Silence. His science officer frowned. "History says the last human fleet disappeared 300 years ago." Cyril answered quietly. "History also says this symbol no longer exists." Neither statement made sense anymore. A transmission suddenly appeared. No encryption, no identification, no source frequency. Just a voice. Static whispered first. Then someone inhaled. The sound was heartbreakingly human. "This is Habitat Vessel Eden." The bridge froze. No one moved. No one even blinked. The voice continued. "If anyone hears this," another pause. "Welcome. Not a distress call, not a warning. A welcome." The recording ended. Silence returned. This time it felt heavier. Cyril looked toward the viewport again. 300 years. No civilization survived alone that long. Not in deep space. Not without worlds. Not without allies. Unless they were never trying to survive, he whispered. His officers turned toward him. "What?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but for the first time in decades, he wanted to." Docking procedures took almost 2 hours. Not because the ancient vessel resisted, because it answered. Every request, every handshake protocol, every approach vector. Someone was still guiding the ship, someone alive. When the docking bridge finally locked into place, no security alarms activated, no defense systems emerged. Only a single line appeared on Cyril's helmet display: "Visitors are family until proven otherwise." His escort exchanged nervous glances. "That's human," Cyril finished. The airlock opened. Warm air drifted inside. Warm. Not recycled and sterile. It smelled of soil, rain, fresh bread. For one impossible moment, Cyril forgot he was aboard a spacecraft. He stepped inside. Grass covered the floor. Real grass. Children's laughter echoed somewhere beyond the corridor. Paintings covered the walls. Handprints. Birthdays. Height measurements carved into steel over generations. Every few meters another family name appeared. Voss Hernandez, Okoye, Chen, Patel, Nakamura, Alvarez. Thousands of names, not crew records. Family history. One hallway alone carried nearly 3 centuries of birthdays. Someone had grown old here. Someone had fallen in love here. Someone had died here. The ship wasn't transporting humanity. It had become humanity. A little girl peeked around a doorway, perhaps 6 years old. She held a wooden toy spaceship. Not plastic. Wood, she smiled. "Are you aliens?" Cyril removed his helmet. "Yes," she grinned wider. "I've never met one." Then she ran away laughing. One of Cyril's guards whispered, "She isn't afraid." "No." Cyril watched the child disappear around the corner. "She has no reason to be." The central habitat resembled a small town. Fruit trees stretched beneath artificial sunlight. Families gathered around long wooden tables. Children chased one another across bridges overlooking rivers no wider than streets. Music drifted through open doors. Someone baked bread. Someone repaired machinery older than empires. No panic greeted the visitors, only curiosity. People looked up, smiled politely, returned to their work, as though alien guests were unexpected but welcome. An elderly woman nodded respectfully before continuing to water tomatoes. A teenager carried engineering tools almost as tall as himself. A choir practiced beneath a glass dome. Cyril had boarded countless military ships. He had never boarded a home. At the far end of the habitat stood a woman wearing a faded naval coat. Its insignia had been repaired dozens of times, gray threaded through dark hair. Her posture remained perfectly straight. Her eyes held centuries. She stepped forward calmly. "I am Captain Mara Voss." No title followed, no military ceremony, only quiet certainty. Cyril introduced himself. She studied him for several seconds, then spoke the first sentence that would later echo across the entire galaxy. "You came much later than we hoped." Even Cyril felt his heartbeat stumble. Not accusation, not relief, simple truth, as though she had been expecting visitors her entire life. Perhaps generations before her had expected them too. He finally managed to ask, "How long have you been waiting?" She looked upward, not at the ceiling, beyond it. "My great-great-grandmother stopped counting after 200 years. No one answered. Inside the command chamber, ancient holographic star maps floated beside handwritten journals. Digital records stood beside paper books. Every generation had added something. Nothing had been discarded. Mara noticed Cyril studying the shelves. "We learned long ago that memory dies faster than machines." She gently touched one worn notebook. "So every child copies part of our history by hand." Cyril looked at the thousands of books. "Every child?" She smiled faintly. "They deserve to know why they were born among stars." He wanted to ask, but something told him she wasn't ready. Instead, he asked, "How many people live aboard Eden?" 23,000, and all descended from the original crew. She nodded. 9 generations. His officers stared. One whispered, "Impossible." Mara heard him. "So we've been told." Far away, beyond 3 political borders, news of Eden spread faster than light itself. Within the luminous courts of the Lyrian Concord, politicians laughed. "Humans?" One senator waved dismissively. "The myths return whenever explorers become bored." Another chuckled. "Perhaps next they'll discover dragons." Their media labeled the discovery a navigational error before investigations even began. To them, humanity belonged beside fairy tales. Elsewhere, inside the black basalt chambers of the Thal Dominion, no one laughed. An elderly strategist slowly stood. His hands trembled. "Repeat the report. The symbol has been confirmed." Silence consumed the room. A younger officer frowned. "Surely it means nothing." The old strategist closed his eyes. "My grandmother made me memorize one sentence before she died." He repeated it softly. "If you ever find a human soldier," his voice nearly broke, "never corner them." The room remained silent. The younger officers exchanged confused looks. "Why?" the old strategist whispered. "Because desperate humans stop fighting to survive." He looked toward the stars. "They begin fighting to keep their promise." No one asked another question. Back aboard Eden, dinner had begun. Visitors were invited, not questioned, not searched. Children filled the hall with laughter. A boy sat beside Cyril. "Is Earth really blue?" Cyril says, "Never seen it?" The boy shook his head. "Only drawings." Another child joined in. "My teacher says oceans make different sounds." A little girl asked, "Does rain smell different on planets?" Cyril suddenly realized none of these children had ever stood beneath an open sky. His throat tightened. "No," he answered softly. "It smells exactly like hope." The children smiled. Mara quietly watched from across the table. Later that night, Cyril found her alone beneath an observation dome. Millions of stars surrounded them. She never looked away. "You've been carrying something," he said. "Yes. For 300 years?" "For longer," he frowned. "Longer?" She nodded slowly. "Our journey began before Eden launched." He waited. Instead, she asked a question. "Commander, what do children in your civilization learn about humanity?" He answered honestly. "That your empire destroyed itself." She smiled sadly. "Convenient. You disagree?" "I know." Before Cyril could ask another question, every light aboard Eden dimmed. Not failed, dimmed. The deck vibrated gently. Deep beneath the ship, something awakened. Not engines, something older. An ancient console illuminated for the first time in centuries. A symbol appeared. The same blue circle, the same white star, then one line of text. "Fleet request received." Cyril stared. "Fleet? What fleet?" Mara's face lost all color. "No," she whispered. "They found us." Before anyone could speak again, another line appeared. One impossible sentence. 4999 vessels standing by. The room fell into absolute silence. Somewhere beyond the darkness between galaxies, something had just answered Eden's call. Chapter 2, The Fleet That Was Never Lost. The words remained suspended above the ancient console. 49,999 vessels standing by. No one breathed. Commander Cyril stared at the glowing letters, waiting for them to disappear like a sensor glitch or a cruel joke from a forgotten machine. They did not. The floor beneath his feet vibrated once. Then again, not violently, almost like a heartbeat. Captain Mara Voss slowly reached toward the console but stopped just short of touching it. Her hand trembled. It was the first sign of fear Cyril had seen from her. She whispered, almost to herself. "It isn't time," the console answered. "Commoner Keeper, confirmed. Waiting for final authorization." Mara closed her eyes. The word sounded less like a refusal and more like a prayer. Across Eden, old bells began ringing. Not alarms, ceremonial bells. Deep bronze tones echoed through gardens, classrooms, workshops, and homes. Children stopped playing. Adults froze where they stood. Nobody panicked. Instead, every face carried the same quiet understanding. They had practiced this day all their lives. Families embraced. Teachers gathered students together. Engineers closed ancient maintenance panels and silently walked toward assigned stations. A little boy looked up at his mother. "Is this why Grandpa always said to keep our bags packed?" She forced a smile. "Yes. Are we finally going home?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I hope so." Far beyond Eden, hyperspace fractured. Blue ribbons of light stretched across the darkness. 1, 10, 100, thousands. An enormous armada emerged with perfect military precision. Each vessel held formation as though every movement had been rehearsed for centuries. Black hulls reflected no starlight. The insignia burned crimson. The Thal Dominion had arrived. At the center of the formation floated a flagship nearly 30 kilometers long. Its bridge remained silent. Commander Kale Reyes stood before the tactical display. His silver-gray skin made him appear carved from stone. His eyes never left the image of Eden. An officer approached. "Commander, all batteries are within range." Kale did not respond. Another officer asked carefully, awaiting firing authorization. Still nothing. Finally, Kale spoke. "Cancel the targeting solution." The bridge turned toward him. "Commander, I did not come here to destroy that ship." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. One finally dared to ask, "Then, why are we here?" Kale answered quietly. "To make sure no one wakes what they are guarding." Silence followed. He remembered his grandmother's final words. She had gripped his hand with surprising strength. "If humanity ever returns," she had struggled to breathe. "Listen before you shoot." As a child, he thought she was speaking in riddles. Now, standing before Eden, he finally understood why her voice had shaken. Inside Eden's command chamber, Cyril looked at Mara. "You knew." She nodded. "Not everything, but enough." She looked through the observation window toward the stars. "Our ancestors never fled Earth." Cyril frowned. "History says they disappeared. They were ordered to disappear." He stared. "Ordered by whom?" She gave a sad smile. "By humanity." Mara activated an ancient projector. Dust floated through the beam of light. The recording flickered. The image was old, very old. A human woman appeared wearing a naval uniform unlike anything in modern archives. Behind her stood thousands of massive ships. They stretched beyond the horizon of space itself. She spoke calmly. "My name is Admiral Eleanor Reyes. If you are watching this, then the secret survived longer than we hoped." The recording crackled. Three-dimensional images filled the room. Stars, galaxies. Then, a tear in reality, an explosion, not a black hole, reality itself folding apart. Something moved inside the darkness. It had no shape, no face, only endless movement. The recording paused. Every person in the room instinctively stepped backward. Even through centuries-old footage, the thing felt aware. Admiral Hayes continued. "We explored beyond map space. We believed every mystery could be solved. We were wrong." The image zoomed toward the fracture. "The universe is not empty. It is sealed." Sorel felt cold. "What is that?" Mara answered softly. "No one knows." The recording continued. "We discovered an intelligence older than stars. It does not hate. It does not love. It simply enters." Images showed entire systems vanishing without explosions. Planets remained, stars remained, life disappeared, no bodies, no ruins, only silence. Human scientists called it the quiet beyond. The room remained motionless. Admiral Hayes lowered her head. "We could not destroy it. We learned something worse. It grows stronger every time violence touches the seal." Kale's flagship received the same recording moments later. He watched alone. Every sentence matched forbidden stories hidden within Thal archives. His hands tightened, so it was true. Back aboard Eden, another voice entered the room, old, gentle, heavy with centuries. Everyone turned. An elderly woman slowly walked through the doorway. Her white hair rested neatly across her shoulders. She carried no rank insignia, no weapon, only a small journal. Mara immediately stood. "Grandmother." Eleanor Voss smiled. "So," she looked toward Cyril. "We finally have visitors." Cyril bowed respectfully. "You are Eleanor Voss?" She nodded. "Ninth Keeper." Her eyes settled on the glowing console. "It finally hurt us." Cyril asked the question filling everyone's mind. "What are those 50,000 ships?" Eleanor smiled sadly. "The galaxy remembers them as humanity's greatest fleet." She shook her head. "It was never a fleet." Everyone looked confused. "It was a lock." Silence. "A lock?" She nodded. "Every ship carries one piece of a containment lattice." She gently touched the ancient console. "Our ancestors didn't build an empire. They built a prison." Outside, stars began changing. Constellations distorted. Light bent unnaturally around empty space. Astronomers across hundreds of civilizations watched in horror. Distances no longer behaved correctly. A star appeared closer than possible. Nebulas folded like reflections on disturbed water. Space itself seemed uncertain. Then, every living being in the galaxy heard something. Not through speakers, not through translators inside their minds. A voice, soft, curious, awake. Hello? Children stopped laughing. Soldiers lowered weapons. Pilots forgot to breathe. The voice spoke again. Is someone still here? Nobody knew the language. Everyone understood it. On Kale's flagship, hardened veterans collapsed to their knees. One officer whispered, "It knows." Kale slowly stood. No. His face had become pale. It has noticed. There was a terrible difference. Back on Eden, Mara covered her ears even though the voice came from nowhere. Tears rolled down her face. I've never heard it before. Eleanor took her granddaughter's hand. Neither had I. Does it know where we are? Eleanor answered honestly. I don't know. For the first time in 9 generations, the keepers had no answers. Without warning, every screen aboard Eden lit simultaneously, not by command, by response. The ancient fleet was awakening. Tiny lights appeared across the star map. 1, 10, hundreds, thousands. Each represented one hidden vessel emerging from places no civilization had ever searched. Inside rogue planets, within frozen nebulae, drifting between galaxies, sleeping beneath artificial moons. One after another, 49,000 ancient human ships answered the signal. No weapons powered, no engines fired. They simply woke. Like guardians opening ancient eyes, Commander Cyril whispered. They've been waiting all this time, Eleanor nodded. Waiting for us to fail. Kale's tactical officer looked terrified. Commander, the human fleet is surrounding the region. Kale looked carefully. They're not surrounding us. The realization struck him all at once. They're surrounding something else. His grandmother's warning echoed again. Never corner a human soldier. Because if humanity was still standing after 3 centuries, it meant the prison had never opened, until now. Kale finally understood. Humanity had never hidden from the galaxy. Humanity had been standing watch. He lowered his head. I thought I understood humans. He watched Eden surrounded by 50,000 silent guardians. I was completely wrong. Suddenly, the lights aboard every human vessel flickered crimson. Eleanor's expression changed instantly. No, the consoles displayed a new message. Containment stability, 91% then, 90, 89%, 88%. The number continued falling, too quickly. Across the stars, reality rippled. A thin black crack appeared between 2 distant suns. It was no wider than a thread. Yet every instinct screamed that it should not exist. The voice returned. Closer this time. The door is opening. Children aboard Eden began crying without understanding why. Animals fled into hiding. Artificial gravity fluctuated. Glass trembled. Even the stars seemed afraid. Eleanor closed the ancient journal and looked directly at Mara. Her voice carried the weight of 9 generations. The time for waiting is over. Another violent tremor shook the ship. The crack between the stars widened, not by meters, by reality itself. And for the first time in 300 years, something moved on the other side. Chapter 3. The last promised the fracture spread without sound. It did not explode across the stars. It simply grew. Every telescope in the galaxy watched the same impossible sight. Space bent inward like cracked glass. Stars stretched into long ribbons of white before snapping back into place. Entire constellations shifted by fractions of a degree. Reality was losing its shape. Inside Eden's command center, no one spoke. They simply watched the containment display fall. 81%, 79%, 77%, each number felt heavier than the last. Then the voice returned, not louder. You kept the door closed for so long. Children aboard Eden covered their ears. Adults felt memories that were not their own. Even Commander Cyril struggled to remain standing. Captain Mara Voss looked toward the stars. We're out of time. Eleanor stepped beside her. No, she gently took Mara's hand. We've reached the reason we survived. Commander Kale Reyes stood aboard his flagship as officers waited for orders. Weapons were charged, missiles armed. Targeting computers calculated firing solutions against the growing fracture. One officer finally asked, Commander, permission to engage. Kale looked at the expanding darkness. No, the officer stared. But if we don't fight, Kale interrupted quietly. My ancestors already tried. He turned toward the bridge crew. Every story my grandmother told me ended the same way. He looked directly into their eyes. They fired first, and every shot made it worse. Silence filled the bridge. Then Kale issued the order that would change history. Transmit on every frequency. The communication officer hesitated. To whom? To humanity. Moments later, Mara's console chimed. A single message appeared. The Thal Dominion requesters permissions to stand beside you. Cyril looked at Mara. She smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Permission granted. Across the void, Black Thal warships altered course. Not toward Eden, toward the growing fracture. The forgotten human fleet responded instantly. Thousands of ancient ships shifted formation. No targeting locks, no warning shots. They opened a path. The 2 fleets moved together. Former enemies became a single line stretching across space. No speeches, no celebrations. Only duty, Kale whispered. So this is what courage looks like. Then the impossible happened. The 50,000 ancient human ships awakened completely. Hull lights that had remained dark for centuries ignited one by one. Engines older than living civilizations came alive. The fleet spread outward in perfect geometric precision. Lines connected every vessel. Blue light flowed from ship to ship until an enormous lattice surrounded the fracture. It looked less like a fleet, more like a constellation created by human hands. Eleanor watched quietly. They remember. Cyril frowned. The ships? She nodded. They were never just machines. The containment field activated. For one beautiful moment, the fracture stopped growing. Every ship held position. Every captain remained silent. Then warning lights flashed. The first ancient cruiser overloaded. Without ceremony, it exploded. Not from enemy fire, from giving everything it had. The lattice weakened. Another ship took its place. Then another, one by one. The oldest guardians began to die. No retreat, no hesitation. Each sacrifice bought only seconds. But seconds mattered. The entity spoke again. This time every living being saw it. Not with their eyes, inside their minds. It had no body, no face. Only endless movement beyond understanding. It asked a single question. Why do you refuse eternity? No one answered. Humanity already had. 300 years ago. Inside Eden, Eleanor opened the small journal she had carried her entire life. Its pages were worn thin by 9 generations of hands. She stopped on the final page. Only one sentence remained unread. She looked at Mara. Mara nodded slowly. I know. Commander Cyril stepped forward. What is happening? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. You've misunderstood our family. We were never guarding the lock. She placed the journal into Mara's hands. We were raising it. Cyril stared. Mara closed the journal. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I am the final key. Silence. Eleanor nodded. The seal doesn't require a weapon. It requires a willing life. For the first time since Cyril had met her, Mara looked afraid. Not of dying, of failing. She looked toward the gardens where children still waited. I promised them they would see Earth. Eleanor smiled gently. They will. What if they forget me? They won't. What if history changes again? It always does. She reached up and touched her granddaughter's face. But love remembers. Neither woman cried. Neither needed to. Across the fleet, every captain received the same transmission. Final Procol variable confirm? No one hesitated. 50,000 confirmations appeared almost instantly. Even Kale entered his authorization. His first officer looked at him. We're not human. Kale answered, we don't have to be. Mara walked alone toward Eden's ancient command core. The corridor walls were covered with handprints, 9 generations, thousands of children. She paused before one tiny print, fresh paint, probably no more than a week old. She smiled. So small, a little girl's voice echoed from behind. Captain? Mara turned. The same child who had welcomed Cyril stood holding her wooden toy spaceship. Are you leaving? Mara knelt. For a little while. Will you come back? Mara looked into innocent eyes. She could have lied. Instead, she kissed the girl's forehead. I'll always be where you can find hope. The child smiled. I'll remember. Inside the core chamber, ancient machinery waited. A single chair stood in the center. No throne, no monument, just a seat. Mara understood immediately. She sat. The systems recognized her. Final Keeper Verfi, Life Signsipt. Seal Repure's complete synchronization. She took one slow breath, then activated the protocol. Outside, the lattice brightened. Every surviving ship poured its remaining energy toward Eden. The fracture screamed without sound. Reality folded around itself. The entity pushed harder. The seal answered. One by one, human ships burned out. Another 1,000 vanished, then another. The line held, barely. Kale's flagship lost propulsion. He ordered every reserve reactor into the lattice. Other alien fleets followed. The Lyrian Concord, independent colonies, merchant escorts, exploration vessels. Everyone finally understood. This was never humanity's burden alone. It only became everyone's burden too late. Inside the command core, Mara could barely breathe. The machine drew not blood, but memory. Faces appeared before her. Children laughing, gardens aboard Eden. The smell of fresh bread. Stories told beneath artificial stars. Earth. Though she had never seen it, she whispered. Some dreams exist. Her voice weakened. So others can keep living. The final lock engaged. The fracture began closing. Slowly, painfully. The entity reached toward the narrowing opening. Its final thought echoed across creation. Not angry, not cruel, only curious. Perhaps another universe. Then silence. The crack disappeared. Stars returned to their places. Reality healed. The lattice collapsed. Where 50,000 ships had once stood, only a few thousand remained. Eden drifted quietly among them. Its command core was empty. Mara Voss was gone. Weeks later, the surviving people of Eden landed on Earth. No speeches welcomed them. No parade waited, only open skies. Children stepped onto living soil for the first time. They looked upward. No ceiling, only endless blue. A little girl removed her shoes. She carefully placed one foot onto the grass. She laughed. It feels soft. Nearby, adults quietly wept, not because the war had ended, because home still existed. On a quiet hill overlooking the ocean, a simple stone marked Mara's resting place. There was no body beneath it, only her name. Commander Kale Reyes arrived alone. He removed the insignia from his uniform, the symbol of the Thal Dominion. He placed it gently against the stone. No words, no salute. He simply stood for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Near sunset, Commander Sorrell visited the grave. A young student approached him. She looked no older than 12. Yes? Everyone keeps asking the same question. He smiled sadly. What question? She looked toward the endless sky. Why did every child in the galaxy grow up hearing? She hesitated. Never corner a human soldier? Cyril looked at the wind moving through the grass because now he finally knew. He answered softly. Because a human soldier never fights hardest to save themselves. He looked at Mara's name carved into the stone. They fight hardest to protect someone they'll never meet. The girl nodded. Neither of them spoke again. The wind carried the scent of rain across the hillside. And somewhere, beneath the first true sunset the children of Eden had ever seen, a little girl ran barefoot through the grass, laughing as if the universe had always been safe. It was always going to end with someone finally coming home.